Hello there. It's really lovely to see the list of people who are tuned in or are planning to tune in today. There's loads of people that I know, and I hope you're all withstanding lockdown as well you can. Here in Kent, things are beginning to turn back to normal a little bit. I've managed to get underground twice in the past week. Sadly, one of those was to do some repairs to sites which have been attacked during the lockdown, because some of the Neds have been using this as a chance to cut locks. I've got another trip tomorrow, which is recreational, and I've got another one next week, a working trip. So things are beginning to get back to the sort of things that we like doing. And putting together this presentation has been a lovely reminder of getting out with our friends and doing exciting things. So I hope you will enjoy it as much as I've liked putting it together and looking at the images. I wish I could use more images, but there's already a lot. I've got about 60 slides here. These sites are all enormous, but you can review them in other places online. You can see a whole load more images than this. So this is just one of them. This is me with a happy regular band of explorers that I go away with, lots of people who I'm sure people here will recognise, in the mighty Enoch V2 storage facility in northern France. And that's one of the sites we'll be looking at later. But my talk is in two parts. Feel free to chip in with questions or comments in the Q&A as we go through. As Tony said, I'll happily pick them up. The talk runs, if I don't ramble on too much, for about an hour and 10 minutes, and I'll be happy to pick up questions at the end or during if they are suitable. So do that. So two parts to the talk. Firstly, how I plan trips and put them together, and secondly, a look at some of the sites. So why would I do a talk about how you plan? I mean, it would seem self-evident. Well, I go on a lot of trips, about 20 a year in the UK and overseas. And people often ask, and I know a lot of people in the community, can we get on the list? And that's always a charged question because, of course, there's limited space. You want quite a small, agile, and sometimes covert group of people so you can move through the landscape quite subtly. And there's personalities involved as well. Of course, you've got to have a team of people who are going to get on for 4 days stuck in cars racing around the countryside. So I thought it'd be a good idea just to go through the steps which I tend to use to make a DIY approach a bit more approachable to get out and do things. There's lots of things in the world that you can go and look at, and finding out about them and how to go see them is within anyone's capabilities. So I thought it was worth going through that. And then the second part, we'll be looking at some of the sites which we accessed. For this, I'm using a 2018 trip, which I did with 8 friends, and we went to northern France. So I'll be talking about the planning for that, concentrating on one site, and then I'll be talking about the sites which we managed to visit and get into, and you'll see some of that. A quick note on the images: this isn't my photography. If it was, it would be grainy with a finger in the way. These pictures come from, some are mine, where I haven't got any other examples, but I also got a vast majority from Nick Coombs, Rob Smith, and others from Chris Howells and Richard Savage. I haven't copyrighted them all individually, but everything on here is, somebody else's property. So a little shout out to particularly Nick Coombs. This is one of his, actually this might be Ed's picture, Nick's brother, because he's not in the picture. So I assume he's behind the shutter. But Nick and Ed run an excellent website. And if you want more, it's called thetimechamber.co.uk. And if you want more pictures of the sites I'm talking about today, they're mainly documented on there. I've also stolen some of the history that Nick nicked from other people before him and used on their website. So I've upcycled that for use here as well. So thanks to everyone for letting me use their images in putting this together. Ed wasn't on that trip, I'm told. Oh, okay. Well, it must be yours then, Nick. I always think of the two of you traveling together. Right. This talk isn't about permission trips, though. Now, I know Subrit has got a very strong ethos about using permission trips wherever possible. I'm sure that that's fine, but nothing illegal is happening here. These sites are by and large open. They are there's no rule saying you can't go in, but I think often a bit of fencing makes people assume that the rule is that you can't go in. These are thoroughly used by the local kids mostly, and just taking the time to be subtle and polite and smile at locals and that kind of thing is usually fine. I do this all the time in France and Germany, and it's fine. There are some exceptions, and when you start seeing signs, you know, which are from higher authorities like the military around the Maginot Line down in Thionville and that sort of area, you know, tread more carefully, certainly. But these are not permission trips, but nothing illegal is happening here. I think we need to move past this idea that the only way you can go visit something is via a permission trip. If you want to get into epic spaces like these ones, then you're going to have to climb over a few banks and fences. Safety stuff, I won't bore you. It's the usual underground stuff: unguarded falls, shafts, unstable roof, unstable structures. Don't walk on wooden floors in some places. All the basics. But the two big ones, of course, in quarries and mines are bad air. That's generally going to be low oxygen. You don't need a fancy meter. You just use a lighter to check if you've got enough air to breathe. But if it starts getting bad, you'll know pretty quickly. Turn around and leave. And the big one is getting lost. So these sites are huge. I'll show you some surveys as I talk. The big issue will be getting yourself in a bit of a muddle, and good planning, sticking to the haul roads, having a survey with you if you possibly can. I've included some surveys here. I'm happy to make these available, but they're all online anyway. I haven't got any original content in this. This is just stuff which I've got for my own planning. Oh, no, I'll talk about contacts later. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the little camera because looking at me isn't going to help you understand anything I'm talking about. And I've got lots of quite detailed images, and I think it's probably better that we concentrate on those. So I'm going to kill my camera now. Boop. Boop. There. So let's have a look. Where are we going? So part one, planning your trip. Where do you start? So as I said, there's lots of things in the world to look at. And it's driven by what you're into. Is it mines or quarries? Is it surface history related those two? Is it military? Within that, is it World War II, Cold War, First War, Korean War, whatever? You know, you choose your thing. The way that I tend to do it is I see images of something that gets me excited. You know, one epic site. Ed has asked, is that Hanukkah in the background over my shoulder? And indeed it was. I put it up there in his honor because he asked me about it. Anyway, sorry. So I tend to pick a key site that I really want to see, and then I fill in to make a trip, and you sort of flesh out around that. But having a theme is really nice, and geography often lends itself to that because certain parts of a landscape will be, for instance, militarized in a certain way due to a certain threat. So you've got the Ostwall, you've got the Maginot, you've got the Siegfried, you've got the Dragon Line around Ukraine, around Kiev, sorry. And in this instance, you've got the remnants of the German V1 and V2 offensive. So losing a war, what do you do? Oh, look, we've developed this new technology. Let's get it within range of the UK and see if we can subdue them there. Using this means now that we've lost air superiority and everything that was associated with that. So that's all concentrated after you get past the development stage into a fairly narrow band in the northern part of France. And so that's what made this the focus of this trip. As you fill in the details, it's important to be thorough and make sure that you've picked up any key sites that also happen to be in the environment, using whatever sources you can, because there's few things more frustrating in life than coming home from a trip where you've been in For instance, one of my most recent ones was Sardinia. It's unlikely I'll go back to Sardinia exploring anytime soon. And getting back and discovering that you missed a killer site. So make sure that you've covered the ground. The trip in Sardinia is a good example, actually, about this theme thing. The thing that got me going there in the first place was the Livorno Mountain American Ace High Tropospheric Scatter site, which is quite a mouthful and can probably be used as a drunkenness test. That's not even underground, but it's an epic site. It's completely destroyed, but it has these enormous aerials on top of it. And I saw some pictures and thought, wow, I've got to go there. And then I explored online and through contacts and through people I talk to online who run local blogs, and filled in about 20 other sites on the island, which has a huge amount of metalliferous mines. It's got plenty of Cold War sites and some other industrial oddities. The whole economy there has collapsed over the past 20 years. So that's how I filled that one out. Now, mines in France have archaeological control. Did you check before going in? No, I didn't. Archaeological control is not exercised over any space which is wide open to the world in several different directions. I mean, literally, these things have no doors on them. And that's true of all the sites we're going to see today. In the case of the French trip, V1 and V2 effort before the fall of France decided that that was to be the focus of this trip, and that's what took us down there. And then you've got your sources, you know, within that broad heading of the V1, V2 program. What can you use? Well, I put up the front page and a site list from a key document that's worth a read. And there are lots of things like this, actually. The Allies went looking for everything the Nazis had been up to, and the Nazis love burying things. So there are lots of documents available like these. These used to be very difficult to access, but these days with digitization, they're really not. I've never seen the physical copy, which is in the Zuckerman archive up at the University of East Anglia and in various other places around the world among the Allies. But after the war, the Allies were keen to learn all they could about the German war effort and technical advances, and several information gathering campaigns were launched by all sides. They were especially focused on Werner von Braun's advances in rocketry, and of course he ended up going to the US and was ultimately the author of the Saturn V that got us to the moon. But sorry, he and his team, it's never one person, he had a large team. But they were all over the sites that were involved in the development of rocketry, the aggregate series that led to the A4 V2 ultimately. So this document is the British Bombing Research Mission, which was sent to France in February of '45 to look at underground munition stores and factories, some of which were associated with the V1, the Doodlebug. It describes 9 sites used by the Germans for storage or manufacture. You can see the specialities are given there on the list. I hope you can read that. It's not a terribly good copy, unfortunately. And these were all established within existing mines or quarries. They're listed here with their specialities: Orival, Carrière or quarries at St-Leu-d'Esserent, Saint-Maximin, Cabernet, Montrichard, Rocher-Cobon, Saint-Perst, Rimbert, and the mine complex at Thiel in Luxembourg. And at St-Leu-d'Esserent, a partial investigation into its function was also made, since it was subjected to a heavy air attack, which we'll look at, and the results of that are discussed in here. So we knew we had a couple of substantial candidates for our list, and we're filling in more detail now. So this is a very good book on the sites of V1 and V2, and it details, you can get the details of the author and the title there. It's available as an ebook actually for about £7. And it details Operation Crossbow, which was the rapidly assembled Allied plan to detect and destroy the Nazis' V-weapon capabilities once they started raining on London and the southeast. And this was stood up very quickly. This book confirmed our initial choice. It identified 3 or 4 large-scale sites in the same area. And this table from the book shows storage capacity for V1s only. They're given their proper designation at the top. V1, of course, is their political name, but they're FZG76s, which I never knew. But so this is for V1s only, but the V2s are also detailed in this book. And a V1 is quite a big thing. It's 8 meters long, about 25 feet, and that's excluding the long tailpipe of its pulse jet. It's got a wingspan of about 5.5 meters, 20 feet. So looking at the numbers there, which are talking between 1,600, 2,400 for Leopold at St-Leu-d'Esserent, or Bertha with 1,000 to 1,500. You can tell these are very, very large sites. Oh, sorry. Yeah, anyone who's in on my last one will realise I'm using 2 PCs and I'm clicking on my notes on one and the slides on the other. And because I'm a bit dim, I don't always do it. So thanks for pointing that out, Nick. So there you can see the table and the book if you need to make any thing. So we knew they must be huge, and the book also lists V2 sites separately, and one, the immense Enoch compound, which was on my opening slide, is almost on top of the Bertha site shown in this table here. So I started drawing up lots of map pins, and that's the beginning of how I always put these together, put together a plan so that you can travel efficiently between sites, because you're not going to get into all of them. So you should expect some no-shows, or and one of those will come up in this talk. So having some options is always a very good idea. The bombing mission report that we looked at before confirmed that despite a withering onslaught by USAF and RAF, St-Leu survived largely intact, but the surface was very badly damaged and it was put out of action. So you can find out something about the remaining state from these documents. So how do you go from location to matching sources to the current landscape? And obviously any site receiving the kind of attention which the Allied Air Forces were so very eager to heap on a base like St-Leu would be very well documented in aerial reconnaissance. And here we see a beautifully annotated before picture from the Air Ministry files. If it would amuse you, you can also see the during and the after pictures online with Google image search, and I've got one of them coming up later, but safe to say a lot of landscaping was done in a very short time. The features noted on that are drawn onto the aerial reconnaissance photograph were informed by sketches which were provided by the Maquis, the French resistance, and as many of the local quarrymen were forcibly put to work in the V1 conversion works, these notes are remarkably accurate even for some underground features. So they knew exactly what they were looking at. Sadly, the accuracy of bombing at the time wasn't such that you could reliably hit something even if you knew where it was. And the Germans also used smoke during the first daytime raid, which made that much more difficult. So with this level of intel, finding the site is child's play. So you can see from the Google map image I've put alongside, if you look towards the lower part of the black and white image, you can see the kink in the river, which matches the Google map, which I've oriented to the same direction. And you can see that I've put 2 yellow map pins on, one at the top of my image and one at the base. In fact, the lowest of these early marked entrances does not go, and you can see why that is on the following slide, which is a survey, again, available online, which gives the scale. I hope that is, I hope that's legible to you. You can see that the site's very large and quite complicated. In broad terms, the red area is the the Wehrmacht factory. The yellow areas are those which were disturbed or destroyed by bombing, and that includes the bottom right-hand corner, which contains the lower entrance tunnels, and that's all the roof. That's roof is now floor, conversion complete. And the other features are the extensive chambers of the original mines, which extend to the northwest and southwest. These large masses which appear can make navigation in those sections of the mine quite difficult, because you have to go around a large perimeter to go a relatively short distance. Furthermore, the top part of the mine, the brown area, is blind. There's no other way out of it apart from the way you came, and you can't walk in straight lines because later uses, mushroom growing particularly, have put in dividing walls, which means you end up doing quite a lot of looping. This survey was adapted from the official record by some very industrious urbexers, and the official plans are all looked after by a community level government agency, because subsurface features are so common and such a nuisance in this area that the government makes it their business to monitor them. They are the cause of a lot of subsidence. There's issues with buried ordnance, services run into them sometimes, that sort of thing. For scale, the distance between the original entrances is around 500 meters in a straight line. So I've got a little drawing tool here I'm supposed to be able to use. So we get in around here, and the original entrance there is, so those 2 points, I hope you can see those, that's about 500 meters, which roughly scales in terms of extent. The system is around 2.3 kilometers north-south and about 1.7 kilometers east-west. So a good sense of direction is essential. As I said, sticking to the major haul roads makes a lot of trundling around unnecessary. And navigation slightly easier in the later, more regular northern zone. The earliest sections down to the southwest are from the 18th century. You see dates there in the 1780s. So the size and complexity of this, it helps if you've got people like Rob Smith and Matt Carter who are on the trip, both of whom can seemingly navigate underground just on a sense of smell. Oh, I'm told my marker wasn't showing. They're little blue dots, John. If you can't see them, that may not have come through. Bigger scribble, I'm being told. All right. There and there. That's about 500 meters. So I think the biggest safety advice I could give is make sure that you, for getting lost, is make sure you've got a good reliable call out. That's even more important when you're that far from home, because you're not going to know people. You're not going to know people locally who would come in and look for you, as we tend to self-rescue a lot in this country. I've only ever been involved in 4 incidents, thankfully, but we've successfully self-rescued from all of them. The usual method in most countries is it's either the police working with local cable clubs or the fire brigade. And I think it's the police in the case of France. I'll just shut the window because I've got a motorbike going past. So there we are. So the next question really is, can you get in? We've never lived in a time where obscure info is so easy to gather. It's remarkable what you can find online, especially using Google Translate and local language searching. A few of the most obvious sources I've put up there, but seek out locals who posted reports and ask them. Some may be guarded, but I've had good success with that approach. That facilitated quite a lot of the stuff we saw in Sardinia, for instance. Locals who are running little blogs for other people in the area or in the country are often quite surprised to find out that people like us are prepared to travel, and they can be a lot more helpful as a result. And if you can do the language, as I said, or are prepared to try with Google Translate and not caring that people think that you're slightly retarded, try more scholarly groups. They often exist just like they do in the UK. Around Maastricht in Belgium, for instance, there are numerous societies that focus solely on the extensive limestone quarries in that region. And there's a lot in France as well. There are some that look only at Boves, for instance, and there's our parallel organisation, the Sub-Brit, which I can't remember. It's got something Souterrain in it. If you've managed to build a network within the community, it's going to save you tens of hours of research. For this trip, and many others, just because he's so prolific, we're indebted to our great friends Oliver and Bettina from Germany, with whom we do exploring trips in France, Germany, and the UK at least a couple of times a year. Oliver's amazing Subground website has some of the best mine photography there is. He's an excellent underground photographer and has a great feeling for light as well, which brings his pictures to life wonderfully. So once you've got a location and some indication that access has been recently possible, the only thing you then have to do is ground investigation. It's boots on the ground. There's no substitute for it. You've got to troop around in woods, like many of us have done, looking for Soviet things in Soviet bases in East Germany and Poland. So buy some tickets, book some accommodation, organise your kit, and set some dates. As I said, you'll rarely get into every target, but good research will guarantee you should get into most. And you can also pick up some other stuff as you're travelling around as well, if you keep your eyes open. So let's have a look at the sites which we managed to visit over 4 days in December of 2018. So let's bring up this first one. So this is the research site which I was going on about. This is St-Leu-d'Esserent. Its name to the Germans was Leopold. They loved their code names and gave one to nearly everything they could find. And this was a V1 storage and assembly site. So the underground quarry here is located in the department of Euse. That sounds exactly the same. I can't pronounce Euse, apparently. Anyway, and originally opened for the extraction of limestone for building. By the end of 1939, the quarry had been developed by the French as an underground factory for manufacturing aircraft fuselages, specifically that of the Leo-45 bomber, apparently, an aircraft of which I'm utterly unaware. The company contracted to produce the fuselages, won a Brissonneau Airlots, developed the underground working by concreting around 3,000 square metres of galleries, and they installed heating, ventilation and accommodation facilities for their workforce of around 1,100 people. And this little battered beauty in front of us is the first sign that you're going in the right direction. So this is the blockhouse. It's actually visible on some of the aerial photography. This is the blockhouse which protects the, it's just a heavy machine gun blockhouse, and this protects the approach to the main entrance to the site, which is off to the left up here, about 100 metres away. And when you get there, you get to this. With the invasion of France in 1940 and the subsequent arrival of the occupation troops in June 40, all of that production of aircraft ceased, and the Wehrmacht seized the underground facility on behalf of the Luftwaffe for their use as a production and storage complex. So the French did quite a lot of the work, and then the Wehrmacht moved in. So with the main entrance being sealed, it's only been sealed relatively recently. I think in pictures in 2012, there are pictures of a gendarme driving around underground with his lights on. That's definitely not possible now. And you can't even approach the site by car now, I don't think, or you maybe can from the campsite to the north. But so the way in now is an auxiliary entrance which flanks the main one. So Julian in the middle of the frame there, it's to his left and only about 10 meters distant. And when you go through that little scramble, you arrive here in a small vestibule area, which doesn't really give any sense of the character of the quarry as you go in. In 1943, organisation TOTE, which a lot of you will know, were tasked with upgrading the factory to allow for the storage and assembly of the V1 bombs. That was one of 3 such sites in France. They constructed new access roads, defensive blockhouses, armoured blast doors, protected ventilation shafts, concrete shelters for the very heavy flak air defences, and started getting it ready. So moving out of that vestibule area, which I haven't shown you because I've forgotten to click it over again, so I'll leave that up for a moment for you to look at. It's, as you can see, this must have been something to do with the administration, I think. There's a series of small chambers here off to the right. I actually wondered if we were in the right place, but we were pretty certain that we were. Further work was undertaken to the interior by concreting another 10,000 on top of the 3,000 which had been done by the French. 10,000 further meters squared were concreted, forming over 700 storage and production areas that eventually covered 10 hectares. And this is what the body of the thing looks like. So it's for moving around these very large vehicles with V1s on them. And there are some large assembly areas. You'll notice this is quite a broad span. This is a big space for a limestone quarry. You'll notice that a trend of a lot of the ones I'll be talking about today are the roof spans which they have, which are very generous indeed. I don't know what so Hillary's asking, what does OPAC stand for? I don't know what OPAC stands for. Have a guess, I would. There is a lot of German signage on the wall. You can see this area's been burnt. That's true through a lot of the quarry, but I think that's mainly people setting fire to cars inside, rather than any wartime damage. But there's an example of the German signage, which doesn't come out terribly well on screen, unfortunately. But again, you can see much better images on Nick and Ed's website. So moving into the further into the quarry, these are the storage bays, and you can see again this section has been burnt, and it's very large pillars and stall. I think there may have been some extension, but it was done by quarrymen, so the mode of operation is indistinguishable really. There's a slight ledge, if you notice, at the top of the pillars, which could be later heightening of the ceilings. It's entirely possible, but I don't know. And there's a car in the bay to the left for scale, you can see there. Initially, French workmen were employed by the Nazis to undertake the conversion works, but they were replaced by Russian prisoners of war once such became available from the Eastern Front, and the French were then subjected to what was locally called service du travail obligatoire, which is forced labour sent to Germany. That was instituted for men of working age to feed the war machine back in Germany. So being in the occupied territories didn't mean they just left you alone. They put you to work on it. And this next image is, how are we doing for time? No, sorry. This next image is, well, have a guess what it is while I just do a bit more of the history. The site was named Leopold-Loh 1106 Feldmelag, which translates as field munitions camp or depot, and it became one of their most important assembly and storage facility for V1 flying bombs. It was strategically near the rail yard by the river, and it was very well protected by a ceiling measuring up to 30 meters thick. And when I say ceiling, I mean overburden. The quarryable rock, the good quality stone that they were seeking for dimension stone, is at a strata which is intersected quite a long way down the hill, only about 10 meters above the level of the river, 10-20 meters above the level of the river, and it goes into a big hill, so you get growing overburden as you go into the hill. There's quite a lot of protection, but it wasn't thick enough to hold off a tall boy attack, So this is one of the areas of destruction near the southern entrances, which I showed you, the yellow area on the survey, which I showed you before. And you notice the dome-shaped collapse at the top. I think this is likely bomb damage. I haven't done a correlation between the bombing mission report and the actual survey, to be honest, but it looks like that. So up to operation, in early 1944, the first train transporting V1 flying bombs arrived from the Nordhausen factory in Germany. They got here as a kit of parts, and they were assembled here, mostly assembled. I think the wings were left off before they went forward to field station, and they had specially adapted vehicles to deliver them to the launch ramps, which were scattered through northern France, of course pivoting round to the Low Countries and I think Denmark ultimately, as the Allied forces advanced through France. So we'll have a quick look through what else remains of the quarry before I tell you about its ultimate fate. And I'm not going to go into this sort of depth with all the sites, but I thought it was worth doing with one or two. So here you can see some areas which the Germans have put in barriers, ventilation, and the floors are all like this. All of the reports I've seen say that it's concreted, but some sections are definitely asphalt, which you often see in munitions stores because it's a bit kinder if you drop the bombs. They're less likely to go off, and spark is less inclined to spark as well. And this, to me, that's me standing on top of a very substantial roof fall. You can see this is more in the form of a traditional roof fall, where it has apparently delaminated along a bedding plane, and you've got this similar thickness blocks have come down as a slab of roof. This is similar to the sort of thing you see in Box in Wiltshire, where some corridors are blocked to full height because the strata above have just dropped down into them like a little a cube dropping into the hole. But yes, a very big fall. I'm on it for scale, not for posing. This is the posing point for nearly everybody who visits the system, and they have their John Shipman has said bomb impact above. Certainly could be, but I think you're too far in here. This is in the northern sector of the quarry. Some bombs did land up there. There's some sections shown on the map, but I didn't do a correlation, John, so I don't really know. We did have a portrait, a very happy looking portrait of all of us taken around this or in this, pretending to drive it. But I didn't put that one up. I thought we'd stick with the dry and more scholarly approach. So next up, we've got, this is the first sign of another secondary use of the quarry. This is from post-war, probably from post-war mushroom cultivation. The plastic at the top indicates it's probably quite recent, and this is an air control door. It's to make the climate in one part of the quarry easier to control, cooler or warmer, whatever they wanted to do. And this place is a very, very big mushroom farm. I mentioned before, they would put doors on and they build walls around some of these sections. So these can be self-contained cells, which might be 150 meters deep, 50 meters wide, and contain lots of little sub bits. And I felt like we trooped around these for hours. And they contain, you can see the method, which is common throughout this area and elsewhere in France. They use plastic bags full of growing medium on the floor. So they come in, plonk them down, and that's it. But very large, and this is all in that northerly section, largely. Right. We have more bits of traditional quarry here with the bay marking. Ooh, I'm not intending to draw. I'm just inept with a keyboard or mouse. So where I've scratched through that 363, that's one of the bay markers, and there's 363A to the left there. So that's like you see in any munitions store, like Moncton, Farley, etc. And there's a lovely little reminders that the quarries had a long life. So this is a quarryman's tally board. These quarrymen were probably piece workers. That's the general way they worked on their personal productivity. And this would be the foreman keeping count, or the overseer keeping count of production in one area probably over time. The increments are quite small. I see 686, 690, 756. So I don't know whether they're blocks or tonnage or what, but there are some reminders and some original signage, the quarryman signage, which tends to be far more cursive script and really quite lovely. There's also a lot of graffiti, but I haven't included much of that because it's a mixed audience and I might get strange reactions. So what happened to St-Leu at the end? So I've included a couple of bits here which you can have a look at. This is the RAF's report on the second of the raids. I think I can't actually see it, but from memory that's what I did. And this was Operation Crossbow in action. So shortly after the launch of the first V1s, the bombing started. There were 3 massive air raids launched on the 4th of July, the 7th of July, my birthday, if anyone's keeping notes, and the 7th of August 1944. And the last 2 of these were carried out with 6-ton tall boy bombs, which effectively stopped activity in the quarries and stopped it being used. Before the RAF raids, as I said, over 80% of all V1s were assembled here, but the weight of the attacks on the site and strong resistance encountered reflect the importance of the target. Bomber Command tragically lost 45 aircraft and crews during the taking of St-Leu, which is a heavy cost, but it forced them back from the coast and stopped these things being thrown. The RAF at the time actually believed that the place had been destroyed totally. In fact, only upper level was affected, and that's discussed in that report which I put up earlier. But access was blocked, it was put out of action, and a large number of V1s were buried. The access road and the railway line were so seriously damaged that evacuation from there was all but impossible. So on the 11th of August 44, the Germans began to retreat and were ordered to evacuate the V1 stocks, which they couldn't do, and then destroy the facilities, which they couldn't do. And I'm not sure they would have had enough munitions anyway, to prevent the Allies from getting hold of this technology. When US troops arrived on August the 30th, their engineers quickly began to study the rockets, and there's some lovely pictures of GIs looking at these things in wonder. The ones that had escaped destruction. In 46, the US forces authorised the French army to take possession, and they cleared it. And in 47, it was finally put back to its original use as a stone quarry to help in the reconstruction of the country. So it went full circle in that time. So that's all we have for St-Leu-d'Esserent. And we'll look at the next site, which is the one which started the presentation, ENOC ENOC 1 and 2, which is a V2 storage site. The two run together, and you can see the connection on the survey on the left. There's a thin line which goes across to ENOC 2, and we were planning to do this as a through trip. You go in one entrance and come out of the other. We were not successful. I'll talk about that in a while. The things I'd highlight on this survey are the pulled out section on the right is the railway tunnel, which is the heart of this construction. This allowed trains to come in with V2s, store them, and then dispatch them to their launchers. They were typically field launch sites using very primitive TELs, transporter erector launchers. I think there was an experiment with silos somewhere, but I don't think they went with that anywhere. But they generally went out on trailers, which jacked up and then fired. So the history of the ENOC quarry, again, predates the war, and it takes its name from the family who owned and operated it for 3 generations. The Urbain ENOC. The current network also includes the Louisette quarry next door, which was operated by a different company. Allegedly, the Germans visited this site in 1938 and introduced themselves as industrialists who were observing techniques of stone exploitation in France. Much later during the war, the workers concluded that this was fifth column activity, looking for sites which would be useful to their war effort. So there's the vast tunnel which you will see. I know most of you probably know this, but I will give a very brief discussion of the V2 for context. During the war, German military developed a long-range rocket named initially when it was in development, it was called the Aggregate 4 or the A4, and it got its political name, the V2, when it was pressed into service. The initial rocket development was undertaken at Peenemünde Army Research Centre on the coast in Germany, northern Germany. And the research and development took place over more than 10 years. So going at this from 1930 till 42, which concluded with the first test flight on October 30th, 1942. These are even bigger than V1s, 14.5 meters long, 1.8 meter diameter, and a total weight of 14 tons, including 910 kilograms of high explosives in the nose. And interestingly, that's not significantly more than a V1. A V1 has about 850 kilos of amatol on board. As I said, this has got 910. But the difference in terms of terror weapons, the V1 is a bit like stalking across the floor with tickle fingers towards a child, because you know it's coming for a long time, and then when it stops, the engine stops, it falls on you randomly. The V2 is like a visitation from a destroying angel. It hits the ground at about Mach 9, I think. You wouldn't hear it, see it. I mean, one of these hit a market in Islington on Market Day in 44, I think, and killed 200 plus people, and none of them knew what happened. So their terror was equal, but of a very different kind, but with the same size bang. Work started in 42 on the mass production of the A4, and it was subsequently named the V2, which is an abbreviation of Vergeltungswaffe, which means weapon of retaliation. If anyone's interested in my German language course, you can apply in the Q&A. So the TOTE organisation, the Nazis' primary civil engineering concern, planned for the construction of special concrete works, which they knew as Sonderbauten, which just means special building, really, that were intended to produce the rockets. It was decided to construct 3 different types of works: assembly plants, LOX, liquid oxygen production plants, and storage sites. And due to the bombing by the Allied forces, these works were generally constructed underground where possible for their own protection. So let's have a look at the example which is left at Enoch. That is in the railway. This is a covered siding which is going towards the main entrance, which is what you can see ahead of you. In fact, this was a false start. That's got a huge plug of concrete in it, and you cannot go that way. But I'll talk about accessing them in a moment. Just finish off the history. After the defeat of France, the Germans quickly moved in and incorporated this site into their V2 plans. When the decision was made to start construction of the base, the Orban Enoch company, which owned the quarry, was seized. The army forcibly recruited workers from the village, much as they had done at St-Leu-d'Esserent, and along with experienced quarrymen to undertake the work. There are reports that people who said no were deported to labour camps in Germany. So I would imagine a lot complied under duress. One of the first things the German did was to install electricity, and that was to speed up conversion, but interestingly, that was later used. You can still see it today, and it was later used for the automation of the quarry. They connected it to the nearby rail line, which was also constructed. The central tunnel, which I pointed out, is about 1.5 kilometres long, 8 metres high and 10 metres wide. And there's a huge blast door, which might be the block of concrete. It almost definitely is the block of concrete that's in the way now. And the further work was done in the galleries to allow V2s, which, as we said, are pretty huge things, to be moved around safely underground. This had a very important role in the war, though. They never finished it. This never went into production. They didn't finish it before France was liberated in 44. But the important role which it did play, and I've failed to do the sky. Sorry, that's the main entrance that you should be seeing. Its role during that part of the war was to absorb an awful lot of resources and management time and concrete and raw materials. So it did hinder the German work while they laboured on it. So getting in, we couldn't get in that way, so we went down the rail. Now this is an image of me, Nigel and Julian, where we waited for quite some time. When we couldn't get into the main entrance, we noticed that there was an aperture in the rock to the upper right. So in the previous image, sort of up there, yeah, we noticed there was a hole, and it went into this very crawly labyrinthine mine, nothing like the sort of thing we were expecting. It must have been the old man's workings. But tantalizingly, we came in at a point where we could look down into the tunnel where the train was inside. So we elected to send our two best climbers, Matt and Rob, in to find another way today, which was easier because this is quite a vertiginous climb. We didn't have any climbing equipment with us, so we used a piece of found hawser, a steel hawser, and we wrapped it around some metal pipes which we found, and we buried them under some rocks and then sat on it, the well-known friction belay, which is perfectly safe. It's unconventional, but they essentially free climbed with an assist down onto the platform level and then went beavering off through the mine to see if they could find another way today, which they did. And then they came back to this point to report in, because we weren't very keen on completing this climb, the other three of us. And they ultimately, they told us to go out and back up the valley. And we came to this point, which is a vehicular entrance to the site, and which we thought must be Enoch 2 initially, but we were miles out. It's actually on the other side completely, but that afforded us access. And then you get into this. It's a very dramatic site indeed. This is part of the network of supporting tunnels. So if you recall, I showed the railway tunnel going through the northerly part of the mine, and it had a sort of parallel system off to the right. These have all been engineered for V2s. All of the curves are very precise, and they're done to given radiuses so that you can maneuver a V2 on its trolley through the system. Oh, I've gone off the end of my slides. How do you do that? Sorry, I'm battling with the... oh, that's actually advancing the slides. I don't want to do that. Yeah, that's where I was. Okay, so sorry, people, I've just had a bit of a brain freeze. So some of the galleries are completely unlined or have supporting brickwork, as you see here. Everything's of quite a big scale, and there are three distinct characteristics through the quarry as you move through. The centerpiece, though, is undoubtedly this. Now, that is the central tunnel with loading platforms on either side. This was designed to reverse a train in, closed blast door in front of it. There was special ventilation. This is steam trains, of course, so there's special ventilation right just inside the door, which would take away the steam and smoke and stop it inundating the tunnel while it stood there being loaded. This platform's over 200 meters long, and it really is an epic space. The local kids use this as like a youth club, apparently. There's plenty of evidence of them having been here. There's another view. I've got a few just because it is a really epic space. I think that one is in by, and that, i.e. going into the quarry rather than out, and the light in the distance is not daylight, but is in fact one of our lights, one of our explorers' lights. Probably somebody who owns I can't remember what they're called, the incredibly bright ones. Anyway, I haven't got one. I'm not spending 600 quid on a light. That's ridiculous. So there's another view of the tunnel, and here's a third. This is a, oh, that hasn't moved on. Eek. Right, there's a third. A repeat, but it is a truly epic space, and this is Nick's favourite image from this set. Where we climbed in, I say we, Rob and Matt climbed in, is at the horizon of the hole you can see in the roof there up the top. But that had some more things underneath it, so it's less exposed than that climb, I'm pretty certain. But that's what they had to clamber down to get in to navigate us through. And once it's kind of haphazard system. You go through this, and at the end of it, there's a big bank of deads and essentially soil, which I haven't bothered depicting because it's just a bank of dirt. And then you end up in the old man system again, and it looks very much like the other limestone mines of the region. It goes into an initially quite labyrinthine system. Scurrian, yeah, exactly. Somebody's just mentioned the very expensive ones are scurrians. Only worn by prideful people, I think. And Rob, you know who I'm talking to. Yeah, you go into this labyrinthine section, and then you go into some of it's tight and some of it's like this, which looks like it's had secondary use. These pillars, I can't work out if they're original or if these are the result of robbing pillar install systems, but they've obviously put in some additional roof support, which you can see here, along with it's a recurrent theme. I know there's more mushroom farming. There are again acres of the things, and a lot of very substantial roof support. This arch here is about 6 meters wide, and a lot of the core tunnels are fully lined like this. Well, this one isn't fully lined. Cheers, Rob. Yeah, this one isn't fully lined, but you can see it has these very strong brace structures. The roof stone here must be quite good. The Nazis loved doing this, and with varying levels of success. I think the roof stones in this area of France are all pretty good, but I've seen this fail disastrously. The worst system by far is one called Richard II, which is in the Czech Republic these days. And that has these sorts of supports. However, the difference there is that every single piece of roof, which is between these spans, these sandstone coloured stuff you could see up there, every single piece in Richard II is on the floor. So you walk along a bit of, you're on the top of the roof, and then you drop down into a gap underneath the concrete stanchion and repeat, and the entire system has collapsed like that. So once you've been through those smaller sections, you come out into this, which is the vast but easily navigable, essentially rectilinear northern section. It has perfectly straight lines, sight lines between galleries. So even though I think it's 60 or 70 galleries deep, and each gallery is about 15 meters deep, so it's a big space. You can see all the way to the end, and it's very easy to navigate. I wonder if it's worth, I'm just going to pop back. You can actually see the character. It differs to the bottom right hand corner, and that's the section which I'm talking about. And if you see this central hall road up the middle, which I'll just draw in, that's the route we tended to follow. But we thought we were going towards Enoch 2, and we were wrong about that. We'd misread the system in some way, so we basically perimeter walked this whole thing. So where was I before? No. I'm supposed to have a slide sort of thing at the bottom, but I've completely broken it, so I'm having to tap through. Right, the reason it is so regular is because the whole thing is cut with these. That is an air-powered pillar saw. There are several of them of various vintages in the system. This is part of the post-war automation of production, and these things leave very distinctive cut marks on the walls. They're entirely readable. You'll notice there's a line of vertical notches in the wall behind. That's something to do with the framing about how this is mounted, we decided, but if anyone knows details of that, of how that works, I'd be quite interested. We were going around puzzling at the marks while we were there. But that gives you a very, very regular way of working. And the way they did it was they would drive the initial road in, and then they'd go sideways, then they'd gallery them to do the cross cuts coming back, and they'd work the entire area until they got to the limit of the usable stone. Then they'd lift all the rails, go back to the beginning, redial another, I think we found holes in here that were about 4 to 5 meters deep, cut in benches initially. So they'd work that stone in large blocks, and then they'd work out the entire floor pattern again, and go through it until they'd taken it down. And this looks like it's worked in several lifts over quite a long period. So how do you navigate? Well, what we do is we put lots of servos on different phones. We carry spare batteries and everything, but it doesn't always work. And this is Rob in the labyrinthine part with Chris to the left, looking engaged in the process. Nigel hiding just behind him. You can just tell by the shirt he always wears underground. And Richard in the background trying to avoid the wrath of going the wrong way, because the rule of underground exploration is if you've chosen the route, you're now responsible for everybody. So making calls is quite stressful. But we didn't manage it this time. We were trying to go for air 2, we couldn't find it, so we ended up backing out the way we'd come in. Now that little insert, so what we did was we worked our way right back out of the northern section. We got out much quicker than we were expecting, actually. It's taken us a long time to get into this point. We're in the system for most of the day, I'd say 5 to 7 hours. Yeah, 7 hours probably. We went out onto the surface. We found the entrance to Enoch 2 quite nearby. We had a pin for it anyway. Went in that way, and we walked back in. And the little insert image there is an aide-memoire for me, really. That is a bridge which is put in, not a bridge, an arch support which appears in the main haulage way. Alistair Kerr, are the notches for climbing up? I haven't seen them on fortifications. They're not. No, they're not put logs, and there's something to do with how the machine is fixed, because they appear to have been done on lots of different horizons, presumably, which correspond to a depth of cut, but I don't know for certain. Anyway, this arch, having made our way through Enoch 2, we got back to the main hallway within about 10 minutes. So we were only 10 minutes from day to begin with. And I took the picture of that bridge because if you're going in by, if you swing right immediately before this into what looks like a chamber and climb up a little ledge 2 feet high, it puts you on the main drag back out to the entrance of Enoch 2. And in fact, I think we could see daylight within a couple of minutes of walking, which just shows you how easy it is to go in circles. Not circles, productive exploratory loops. That's better. Okay, and that's bye-bye to Enoch. An amazing site, loads to it. The next mine I'm going to show you, I can't even see what's coming next now. I've only got one image for this site. So we did this the same day as we did Enoch, and we'd been underground, as I said, for 7 hours, and we're all flagging slightly. Better is another V1 store. I took one picture of us in a car mucking about. It's another large V1 storage site. It uses the same railhead as Enoch, but this one appears to be the traditional resting place of all the old cars in the area. So we had a quick skim around the site generally, and we were playing guess what the car is, because they're all in quite an advanced state of decay, as you can see there. Julian, who is with us, of course, is an expert in all things rusty and Russian. Had no advantage in this instance because they were all French and rusty, but we didn't know what most of them were anyway, but that was it. It did seem smaller than it should do for a site that could purportedly hold 1,000 to 1,500 V1s. But that may be because we believe Bertha spanned 2 close but separate quarries, and we didn't even bother with the second one, as day was done. We wanted to have some dinner. We entered the place just as the December light started fading, so probably about 4 o'clock, and we walked out to pitch black about an hour and a half later. So that was better. So that evening, for this day, this next day that I'm going to talk through, this one's essentially vicarious for me, because I wasn't there. In a state of advanced refreshment on the end of day 2, I returned home from the restaurant and turned my ankle on some very poorly installed paving slabs on a bridge, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I didn't do anything this day. I walked around near our hotel and I had a row with a security guard on a Napoleonic fort, who didn't want me to go in and look at it, and didn't understand the English approach of just saying, why can't I? Anyway, that's what I did with my time. But the guys went out and they had a look at 2 sites. Sorry, 3 sites. So the first site, as it says there, was the sealed sand mine. And this underlines the point that you never know what's going to happen. So we'd had a friend visit this place, or friend of a friend, within a month, I think, a month or 6 weeks of our visit. And when we arrived, there was a new notice board outside talking about bats, and there was no way in. It was completely grilled. So gave up, went on to the next one, and it was open again within a month as well, because the locals didn't like their place being sealed up, so they cut it open as well. So they did get into 2 mines. Entrance was from a surface quarry. There are notice boards, interpretation boards in the quarry, which you can look at. And it all starts off very much like the previous one. I'm 2/3 of the way through. I'm going to whip through this bit a little bit. Again, very wide ceiling, showing the miners had a lot of confidence in the roof stone, but by the number of retrospectively fitted supports, they may have had a little bit too much. There's 2 types here. There's the stone type, which you can see, which look like the other ones. They've also got these petrol or oil drums filled with concrete, which is quite a resourceful way of doing it. And Avenue Anglaise, English Avenue. So a little home from home for us. Deads stacked against the wall, apparently with no part to play in roof control. Inset is one of the areas where modern mushroom growers have used plastic sacks again to do the crops. This activity probably succumbed to secondary infection of a different fungus that wasn't saleable. That's what happens to a lot of these things underground. We've got lots of examples in the UK, such as Poulton's quarry down in Bradford on Avon, which we used to be able to visit, and the Hearthstone mines of Surrey, which are looked after by Wealdon Cave and Mine Society. But the jewel of this place is this. What makes the place quite exceptional, if not unique, is the quality of the stonework near one of the entrances. This is the work of master masons, and these galleries, with their Gothic style vaulted roof supports, keystones, the whole bit, appear to be the primary roof control in this portion of the mine. 1762, no reason to doubt that. That's contemporary with a lot of the stuff that was done to establish the catacombs in Paris, of course, where you see very good quality stonework in lots of places, in staircases and secondary structures which are built there. And it's just beautiful. I really missing this. I'd love to have seen it. But what this makes me think is the time and therefore the money which this construction must have consumed can't have been for purely practical reasons. Was it a showpiece for the quarry's rising apprentices, perhaps? Was it to impress shareholders or local dignitaries? We see that a lot in the mines around Nenhead and some of the lead mines in Wales, for instance. Either way, whatever they left behind is both beautiful and intriguing. I see I've got, I'm on 41, I've got 19 minutes, so I will whip in case there are any questions. This is an interesting site. This is the Mesnil-le-Roi Hotel. That's Organisation Treaties Atlantique Nord, or NATO to you and me, at Merry. And it starts out as a very straightforward mine, but this is a very famous explore, as it's got a large cache of modern military vehicles hidden within, and they're in surprisingly good condition. Access is wide open, although some of the local houses, nearby houses, and it is on a residential street, weirdly, have apparently nominated themselves as gatekeepers, so a discreet entry is advised. Maybe they're there as a private collection. There's too much diversity, I think, for them to be actually a military cache. You tend to get large numbers of the same type piled up by armies, etc. This was a very late explore. The guys decided to go do it after dinner. They got in at about 11 at night and they're out after 1 in the morning. This place needs a revisit, along with the Gothic mine we just saw, because I didn't do it, so I couldn't attend. I was injured. And the team that did go they managed to miss the link to the part which actually contains the vehicles they were seeking. And the rush to do so divided the party. They all got displaced from one another. I can only say that was probably because I wasn't there to keep things in good order. But this is limited phone-only pics because Rob was rushing around trying to find the things, but he did grab a few shots, which we can look at here. There's some evidence of its original use and its secondary use. So Cave Casimir could mean it was a wine store. I don't know. But there's that cursive script, which I mentioned earlier on. They did find some vehicles, but hardly the tanks which they were seeking. But let's see what they could have won. So this is a page taken from a French Urbex site and just shows a selection. There are light tanks, there are armoured personnel carriers, there's this thing, I don't even know what that is, it looks like a Paris-Dakar car. But, you know, there's an amazing range of stuff down there. And I think Rob nearly cried when they missed it, but there we go. Oh, I went too far. But you can see how easy it is to do so. This is a survey of those quarries, and there's one road between the two. It reminds me of the connection between Monk's Park and Ridge down in Wiltshire, where if you know exactly where it is, it's a doddle to find. But if you've never been there before, you don't stand a chance. You're not going to find it, and we all bury it when we've been through it anyway. But there was one chance and they blew it. And as I said, they're all in disarray across the quarry as well. So no chance. I'm just going to whiz through the last two sites. The first one, very different. It's an entirely modern quarry. This closed down in '96, I think, or maybe even later. This is the collection of quarries du bois, or carriers du bois. This is some of the surface structures, a very large surface site. It's completely open. There are some of the galleries are blocked, but only some. Quite why that's worth doing, I don't know. This is a loading structure on the surface. You can see it's a modern mine. It's been cut with a Samson saw or similar. You can see the cut marks in the roof, and critically, you've got resin-held rock bolts holding the roof up. No meshing, so they're still quite confident, but they've put in some bolts for confidence. In mines where you expect the roof to start falling, you put sleepers or steel mesh between these fixings. And it's got modern ventilation throughout. More rock bolts. You can see it's quite conservative pillar and stall working, and they've got blown air ventilation into the centre of the mine. Oh, so Nick has just, I was going to say opined, but he knows his stuff, so it's almost definitely right. That thing we saw before that looked like a Paris-Dakar rally car is an Ultrav M11 scout vehicle made by Panhard. Now, I didn't think Panhard even made cars still. They used to make slipstream races in the 1960s with tiny engines, but I didn't know they did military vehicles. Mind you, you go to the Czech Republic and all their tanks are Skoda, so people make the things they know how to make. This is one of the entrances, which is a quarry coming off an old quarry. So we're in a big depression in the ground, which is sheer-sided on all sides, and they tunnel through to this section to be able to get into the deep part of the workings. And that's where we got in. So a huge pile of rocks, and there's Julian. That isn't limestone that he's holding above his head, that's polystyrene, but he was acting the strong man. And on the right, this is why you watch where you're going in quarries. That's a drop of 5 or 6 meters, which is unguarded. Obviously, just watch how you step. So this last site was a little delight. I'm not going to give any information about where it is because I don't want this in the public domain. It's not on general social media as far as I'm aware, but it is a delight, and we were given the location and we navigated there. You go through the woods for some time and you come across this tower, which is supposed to look medieval, I suppose, and you walk up to the tower and you notice that there's a cliff next to it. So you walk up to the cliff and you can see the greensward of a field below you, a small field. So walk around the edge and down onto ground level, and you come to this, which is an amazing little place. I mean, on the right, you've got some hand-cut quarrying, unknown date. We didn't see any dates in there. We did see a bunch of odd things in there. There's some strange things stored in that quarry, which I'll talk about in a minute. The main entrance is to the left of the house-looking thing in the middle, and that's what makes this place so intriguing. That's a folly. It's made very oddly. It has poetry. It has some poetry which essentially says happiness belongs to the contented philosopher who can accept the beauty of nature, or something to that extent. I translated it when I got home. But the whole thing is built to look like a mixture between a fairy grotto, with the woodwork, for instance, is finished with natural twigs, and it's full of these engravings, some spurious dates. There's 1456 in a poem carved above above the fireplace that you can see in the bottom right picture. It's a lovely little thing. It's supposed to be trying to look much older, but it's almost definitely a 19th century folly, and it looks like a practical space because it has fireplaces and a bedroom in the back. No apparent kitchen, but there is a burnt down section near it, which we think might have contained a kitchen at some point. And the quarry behind contains these wagon wheels, 17 jacuzzis, which have been ripped out of somewhere, and a film set. I'd never seen a film set up close before, but this one, they're remarkably insubstantial things. They'd apparently done it so that somebody could be in a cave setting and appear to go to a door, like a goblin's door or something. And it's made out of just enough structural timber to allow an actor to walk up it a few times, and then the rest is polystyrene, plaster and wood. So we tried the staircase very briefly, but that was it. And then, like the last day of all of these trips, we had to race for the Channel ports to catch our Eurostar and come home, because some of us, Julian comes up from Cornwall, so he has a very long journey even when he gets home. So that was the end of a fantastic trip. And if you've got any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them. This picture here is a church which we found, which had been totally abandoned. It's now sealed up. It's got grills on, but you can see it still has stained glass and everything. And it's literally in the middle of a wood with not even a path to it. It's very strange indeed. But that was near the folly. So if anyone has any questions, pop them in the Q&A. And I'll see if I can answer them. We have 10 minutes remaining. Okay, well, while you're not talking, I'll make a call to action. Putting one of these together it's quite nice. It's quite cathartic, or quite nostalgic, I should say. Tony has been imploring people to come to him, and I've seen some idle chat on the subreddit forum saying, wouldn't it be nice, and up with this sort of thing in a very Father Ted fashion. But doing is a lot more important than opining that it would be nice if we had more. So I'm happy to continue doing some of these. I think these should be part of our non-wartime beat as well, to reach the membership with things that we've got to look at. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can be a site you've visited, which you feel strongly about or know something about. You can give a clueless slideshow if you like. It doesn't really matter, but content is what matters. John Simpson, so please think about making one of these, especially if you're associated with a particular site which you work on. So John Shipman has asked what the stratospheric scatter thing was. That's ACE High. It's a system which was employed right across NATO. We had several sites in the UK, one of which survives with its dishes at Scendleby in Lincolnshire. And it's a way of communicating using very, very weak signals bounced off the stratosphere, which are then picked up by these colossal aerials. They're amazing places. And as soon as this shit show is over, I'm planning on flying to northern Italy and going to the one at the top of the mountain there, along with trips to Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh and other places as soon as we can fly. And I'd exhort you all to do the same. Stenigot, you're absolutely right, Ed. Yeah, it wasn't. What did I say? Scendleby. Yeah, Scendleby is in Lincolnshire, I think, but I don't think it has anything there. Ed has rightly corrected me that the NATO Ace High site in Lincolnshire is Stenigot, RAF Stenigot. A lot remains there. There's an RX bunker, surface blockhouse, and Ed's just put up the link on the time chamber on the Q&A, so have a look at that. If you go to Stenigot, expect a very rough reception from the farmer. He does not like visitors at all. It's sadly demolished. Wow. He didn't like visitors, so presumably he got rid of it because of that. I had a question which I missed. You mentioned Monkton Farley mine. Oh God, I'm terrible at driving this thing. You mentioned Monkton Farley mine. This is Brian Stemp. I tried years ago to get in. Is it still accessible? No, it's not. Part of it, if you want to be a volunteer for the National Trust on organising their archive, you can get in legitimately, but it's a secure storage site and it's very well guarded. All of the traditional entrances which people used to climb down have all been sealed. So no, there's no way in. And if you do want to climb in, it's a fairly giddy climb as well. But you won't get in anyway. So the best bet is get in touch with the National Trust and say you want to sort out. You will have to work, but if you give them a day of your labours, then you can go down there and do that. Right, well, I think that's probably enough of listening to me blether on. So I'll leave it there and I'll bid you all goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. It's nice to know that people are out there listening, and this thing's quite nice in that you get a count. John Shipman, put that on the forum. That's what that kind of stuff is for. So I hope you and yours are all suffering this with good humour, and I hope to see you underground again soon. All right, that's me done. Bye, everyone.